All right, let's dive into a really powerful and honestly pretty challenging idea from the philosopher Achille Mbembe. He says there's this one major force that's completely reshaping, well, everything: our world, our politics, even how we think about ourselves. He's got a name for it: brutalism. And really, if you want to get a handle on what's happening today, you've got to understand this concept. So Mbembe starts with this massive question, and he argues it's the political question of our time. I mean, it cuts right to the heart of everything. Who gets to live where? Who owns what? And maybe most importantly, what happens to the people who are just written off, the ones considered to be nothing? The way we answer these questions, that's what defines the world we're all living in right now. Okay, so to really tackle that huge question, Mimbe gives us this new framework, this concept he calls brutalism. Now, if your mind immediately jumps to that architectural style, all that concrete, you're actually on the right track. That's exactly where he gets the name. But trust me, he takes that idea and applies it to something way, way bigger. Think about it, right? Architectural brutalism is all about taking raw concrete and using incredible force to shape it into these huge, imposing structures. Well, Mbembe says that's exactly what's happening to us. He's talking about a social brutalism, where immense force, from technology, from the economy, from politics, is being applied directly to human life. And what's the goal? To reshape us, to mold humanity into something manageable, predictable, and just like that concrete, kind of solid. And this quote right here, wow, it really gets to the heart of it, the end game. The ultimate project isn't just about control. It's about a total transformation. It's about taking all the messy, beautiful, unpredictable stuff that makes us human and crushing it down into simple matter and energy, reducing us to raw data that can be calculated, processed, and, basically consumed. Now, it's so important to get this straight. This isn't just random violence or chaos. That's not what he's talking about. And Mbembe is super clear that brutalism is a planned project. It's a calculated system. It uses all the tools of our modern world, digital algorithms, behavioral science, economic pressures, to kind of numb our ability to think critically and to completely reshape our society from the ground up. So what does this all mean for us, for you and me? Well, this is where it gets really personal. This whole process leads to a massive shift in what it even means to be human. We're not just talking about some abstract political theory anymore. This is something that challenges our very identity, our sense of self. Let's break down how. This comparison here just lays it all out, plain and simple. Over on the left, you've got the classic Enlightenment idea of a person, right? We have reason, we're separate from things, from objects. The whole point of liberation was to fight against being treated like an object. But then look at the right. Under brutalism, that line just gets completely blurred. We become what Mbembe calls biosynthetic entities. Think about that. Part biology, part technology, part flesh, part data. We're totally open to being programmed, encoded, and shaped by the tech around us. And what's driving all this? He calls it the computational turn. It's this idea that everything about us, our experiences, our hopes, our fears, even our inner thoughts, is being translated, converted into data. We're being formatted. And why? So we can become these perfectly predictable, perfectly manageable players in what Mbembe calls one single giant global market. Okay, so we've talked about this big kind of abstract idea of brutalism, but how does it actually play out in the real world, like in our politics? Well, Mbembe argues that we see it everywhere, in this incredibly powerful and growing desire for division. He calls it a politics of secession. And you can really see what he means when you look at this comparison. It's a stark difference. On one hand, think about the great struggles of the past, like the civil rights movement. The whole goal was universal recognition, right? To build a world that we could all share, a world in common. But now, look at so many of the identity struggles today. Mbembe points out that the logic has flipped. It's all about drawing lines, creating borders, separating. It's about finding your bubble, your echo chamber, and reinforcing that separation. And that leads him to this really provocative statement. He calls these modern identity struggles the new opium of the people. And look, the reason he says that is because he's worried. He fears that while we're also focused on these divisions, we're being distracted from the much, much bigger threats, these planetary-level challenges, like brutalism itself, that are actually affecting every single one of us, no matter what group we belong to. So this all boils down to two main forces, two logics that he says define our era. On the one hand, You have this intense desire for personal boundaries, this kind of mass narcissism, where our digital selves become these carefully curated, almost fetishized objects. And then, on the other hand, you have this political desire for secession. This is where the powerful literally try to get rid of, to wall themselves off from anyone they consider nothing, which leads to the camps, the walls, and the fortified enclaves we see popping up all over the world. Now, just for a second, to really get where Mbembe is coming from, it helps to understand a little bit of the academic background he's working with. He makes a really important distinction between two terms that people often mix up: postcolonial and decolonial thought. So here's the quick rundown. Postcolonial thought, very broadly, tends to look at what happens after colonialism, the mixing of cultures, this idea of hybridity, trying to find a shared humanity. Decolonial thought is a bit different. It puts the entire system of Western reason on trial, arguing that its core logic has always been about domination and extraction. Now, Mbembe draws on both of these, but knowing that difference really helps you understand the foundation of his bigger argument. Okay, so I know this all sounds pretty grim, this diagnosis of brutalism. But, and this is a huge but, Mbembe does not leave us in despair. He actually points to a source of incredible hope. And he finds it in the continent of Africa, which he sees as this massive reserve of strength, not just for itself, but for the entire planet. And you can really feel this in his writing. In this one passage, he's talking about looking at the Congo River, and he describes this feeling, this raw, untamed energy. It's a life force that, by its very nature, pushes back against the cold, hard, calculating logic of brutalism. He says this strength and reserve really comes from four key things. First, just its sheer size. The physique of the continent is monumental. Second, its people, a young, growing, and incredibly diverse population that he sees as the future of humanity. Third, the unknown, all the elements and forces there that simply escape our modern obsession with calculation. And finally, and this is probably the most important one, it's metaphysics. We're talking about ways of thinking that have always known that a human being is more than just stuff, more than just matter, that there is an incalculable dimension to us that you just can't digitize or download. And that, right there, is the final challenge Mbembe leaves us with. We're facing this global project, brutalism, that wants to reduce all of life to a simple formula. But what he shows us is that other ways of living, other ways of being are absolutely possible. So the question isn't just what's happening to us anymore. The real question is, what are we going to do about it? How do we, all of us, tap into these untamed, incalculable energies to build a future that isn't made of concrete? That's the question he leaves for us to answer.